All right, the UK's 2025 budget has dropped. And look, it's this huge, complicated document that's going to impact pretty much everyone. So what's actually in it? Well, we've waded through the whole thing to pull out the key details you really need to know.
So let's get right to it. The big question, the one you probably care about most is, how does all of this actually affect your wallet? To figure that out, we're going to break this whole thing down into 5 key pieces. We're going to start with the big picture, the economic challenge. Then we'll get into what they're doing about the cost of living, dive into some major tax system reforms, look at changes to public services, and wrap up with the government's big bet on growth. Okay, first up, the UK's economic challenge. Let's really dig into the why behind all these decisions, because honestly, every single thing in this budget is a reaction to some pretty serious headwinds the country's facing. And you don't have to take my word for it. The government's own budget document puts it pretty bluntly. They straight up admit that for a lot of working people and businesses, the economy just isn't working well. This right here, this is the core problem they're trying to solve.
So what are the root causes here? Well, the budget points to 4 big challenges. First, productivity has been weak, really since the financial crisis. That's a huge deal. Second, government borrowing is sky high. We're talking 3rd highest in the G7. Ouch. Third, and you've definitely felt this, there's a massive cost of living squeeze. And to top it all off, the economic forecast just got revised, and not in a good way. Tax revenues are expected to be lower than they thought.
And that revised forecast? Yeah, it's a really big deal. We're talking about a £16 billion shortfall. Basically, because productivity is lower, the economy grows slower, and that means the government collects way less in taxes than it planned for. That is a massive hole they now have to plug.
Okay, so with that pretty grim backdrop, let's move on to what they're doing to help right now. This section is all about tackling the cost of living with some direct relief for your bills.
First up, a big one, energy bills. The plan is to knock an average of £150 off household energy bills. Now, the catch is, this doesn't actually kick in until April 2026. Next, for anyone who takes the train. Regulated rail fares are being frozen for 1 year. For some commuters, that could mean a saving of up to £300.
And if you're a driver, that 5p cut to fuel duty, it's being extended again all the way through to August 2026.
But it's not just about energy and transport. There's a bit more support packed in here. We're also seeing a 1-year freeze on prescription charges in England. The national living wage is getting a bump up to £12.71 an hour in April 2026. And for pensioners, the state pension triple lock is being maintained, which means a 4.8% increase is coming.
All right, let's talk about the big one, reforming the tax system. The government's really trying to do 3 things here. Get contributions up, make the whole thing feel a bit fairer, and modernize it for today's world.
So this brings us to a really important kind of sneaky concept called fiscal drag. Honestly, this might be the single biggest tax policy in the entire budget. Here's how it works. The government is freezing the income tax and national insurance thresholds until 2031. So even if your pay goes up just to keep pace with inflation, you could get pushed into a higher tax bracket. It's a way for them to raise more tax money without actually announcing they're raising the rates.
Now, to try and make things feel fairer, the budget takes aim at wealth and assets. The idea is to balance out that fiscal drag we just talked about. So what does that look like? Well, there's a new council tax surcharge for homes worth over £2 million. We're also seeing higher tax rates on income you get from property, dividends and savings. And there are some changes to reliefs for things like pension, salary sacrifice and employee ownership trusts.
And speaking of modernization, here's a huge one for the future of driving. Right now, petrol and diesel cars pay fuel duty at the pump, but as we all switch to electric cars, that tax revenue disappears. So starting in 2028, a whole new system is coming in for EVs. They'll pay a new mileage-based charge, what they're calling EVID, so everyone contributes to road upkeep. Okay, so we've seen how they're raising the money. Now, how are they spending it on public services? This is all about a mix of new investment, a big push for efficiency, and some really significant welfare reforms. Probably the single biggest headline coming out of the welfare changes is this. They are scrapping the 2-child limit in universal credit. And the projected impact is just massive. The government's own numbers say this one change alone will lift 450,000 children out of poverty. That is a huge number. So the natural next question is, how is this being paid for? Well, the budget outlines a few key areas. They're reforming tax breaks on the mobility scheme,
cracking down harder on tax and benefit fraud and errors, and they'll be increasing the number of face-to-face health assessments for people claiming benefits.
All right, there's also a new efficiency drive across government departments. They're looking for almost £5 billion in savings, but here's the crucial part, as you can see. While everyone has to find savings, only the NHS and the Ministry of Defense actually get to keep the money they save and reinvest it. For every other department, those savings go straight back to the Treasury.
And for the NHS, that reinvestment is going to be focused on a 3-step plan. Step 1, establish 250 new neighborhood health centers. Step 2, pump an extra £300 million into technology to make things run smoother. And step 3, set a pretty ambitious target to increase NHS productivity by 2% every single year. And all of this, the tax changes, the spending, the reforms, it all leads to this final section, the big bet on growth. This is the government's ultimate goal. Everything we've just talked about is designed to feed into this one single ambition.
So, what's the actual game plan for growth? Well, it's a mix of short and long-term moves. Right now, they're protecting public investment in infrastructure. For the ongoing part, they're reforming planning laws to get things built faster. And looking to the future, they're backing businesses with tax incentives and RMD reforms, and putting $1.5 billion into skills training and a youth guarantee.
But after all of that, what's the forecast? What does the independent watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, actually think is going to happen? Well, as you can see, they're predicting pretty modest and steady growth. We're looking at about 1.4 to 1.5% from 2026 onwards. So that's the, let's call it the sober reality check to all those big ambitions.
And that really brings us to the final multi-billion-pound question, doesn't it? We've seen the plan, the tax reforms, the spending priorities, the big bet on growth. But will this whole complicated mix of policies actually deliver the kind of growth the UK really needs to improve life for everyone? Well, that is the big unknown.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today we're focusing squarely on community assets and more specifically on a business plan designed to turn one of them into a real cultural destination.
That's right. We're getting into the 2024-2026 business plan for a place called 19 on the Park.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really analyze how they plan to hit some, very aggressive facility utilization targets.
Exactly. And also to look at the key programming shifts that are driving that growth and, understand the strategy behind making this place a destination, not just another building.
And based on the internal notes, they desperately need a rebrand. The plan actually quotes feedback from the community, and it really speaks volumes.
Oh, it's pretty revealing.
Yeah.
You get things like, do you mean the clock tower?
Right. Or we have a theater, and my personal favorite, I heard it's haunted.
Right. And that just perfectly highlights the challenge. They have to move from being this building people sort of recognize to a place people actively want to go.
So the mission statement in the plan is pretty clear about that.
It is. The core mission is to affirm the facility as the central hub for arts and cultural programming. Everything else has to support that one identity.
So if that's the mission, what are the actionable strategies? The whole operation seems to be built around 4 main pillars.
Yep. Those 4 pillars define everything going forward. Concerts, rentals, camps, and programs. The critical thing is they're not separate. They're designed to feed into each other, especially in the off-season.
Okay, let's unpack that utilization story first, because the growth they're showing is, well, it's kind of explosive.
It really is. The source material shows that facility usage went up by a massive 26% just between 2022 and 2023.
Wow. Okay, so what are the raw numbers?
So get this. In 2022, they were using the facility only 119 days out of the year. That's, 33% usage?
Only a third of the year. Okay, so there's huge room for growth there. But to pull that off in just 12 months.
And they did. By 2023, it jumped to 215 days, hitting 59% usage. And that's not just from better marketing. That's a serious operational shift. They started filling weekdays, off-peak months, you name it.
So they've already moved from 33 to 59%. That's the easy part, right? Capturing that low-hanging fruit. But the targets for the future are even tougher. They're aiming for 70%.
That's right. The goal is 65% in 2024 and then a full 70% in 2025. And you're right, that last 11% is the hardest to get.
So how do they plan to do it?
It all comes down to using the facility during what used to be downtime. That's why the strategy leans so heavily on these multi-week camps and programs during the concert and rental off-season.
I have to say, I'm a little skeptical here. Is 70% actually realistic? We're going to talk about some of their limitations later, like not having a full kitchen.
It's a stretch goal, for sure.
Yeah.
But the strategy is super focused. They know they can't win on, say, high-end weddings, so they're doubling down on programming to fill the space.
Which is a perfect lead-in to the first pillar they're fixing, live entertainment.
Yes, specifically the concert and patio series. The findings around the concert series showed a lot of inefficiency.
How so?
Well, historically, it was just inconsistent. The genres were all over the place. Way too many stage productions, for example. They had repeat performers, and the pricing was confusing. It was a barrier for people.
And the 2023 data really backs that up. Theater was overrepresented, but the numbers showed that licensed comedy, specifically Yuk Yuk's, was growing fast.
Exactly. People wanted a specific, curated night out. So the new strategy is all about a cohesive annual series. They've planned out these predictable slots, an original artist night, a comedy show, a tribute act, a family show.
So you know what you're getting.
You know what you're getting.
Yeah.
That consistency builds an audience that's actually waiting for the next season to be announced.
And they're kicking it off with a big launch event, right? This opening night reception.
Right. And that's not just a party. It's a strategic move to engage the local arts community, raise the series profile from day one, and, do some fundraising and cross-promotion right at the start. It's about creating ambassadors.
Okay, what about the summer? The patio series sounds like it was in even worse shape.
Oh, it was a mess. It just couldn't find its footing. At first, ticket prices were too high, so nobody came. Then in 2022, they made it free, and people still didn't show up. The value just wasn't clear.
So the new approach is more about creating an experience.
Precisely. They're shifting to this themed experiential model. So June is Country on the patio, July is Jay Az's on the patio, and August is 90s on the patio.
Interesting. So they're targeting 3 completely different but reliable demographics.
Exactly. It allows for much more targeted marketing and hopefully more consistent attendance.
Now, before we move on, we have to mention something they're getting rid of. Films.
Yes, the strategic removal of general film programming. The plan basically confirmed that even though the 55-plus audience kept asking for films, nobody actually came.
What?
The logistics just didn't add up. Screening rights are expensive, and you're competing with Netflix, with high-quality home theater systems. It just wasn't a sustainable business. So now it's just for one-off holiday events or special partnerships.
Okay, so that brings us to the pillars that are really driving those utilization numbers. Rentals and camps. With rentals, it seems the building itself was the first major hurdle.
It really was. The big limitation is the lack of infrastructure. There's no full commercial kitchen, and it's hard to separate the spaces for, say, a wedding ceremony and the reception.
So not surprisingly, social events weren't a big draw.
Barely blip. Social rentals weddings, parties made up only 14% of their rental stats in 2023.
So given that weddings are usually high-margin bookings, why not just invest in a kitchen? Is the capital risk just too high?
That seems to be the calculation they made. They recognize that social events aren't their sweet spot. The focus now is completely on corporate and internal rentals.
Which were already pretty steady.
Very steady. Each of them accounted for 43% of rentals in 2023. So they know their market. It's meetings, conferences, municipal use. It's lower margin, sure, but it's predictable.
So the strategy isn't about building a new kitchen. It's about building loyalty with the clients they already have.
That's it, exactly. And it's all about rigorous follow-up. They're sending out post-rental surveys, asking for testimonials for marketing, and critically trying to rebook clients for the next year right after their event ends.
They're looking for stability.
Right. And the goal is measured. They're only aiming for a 10% increase in external rentals each year. There's just 5 extra dates in 2024. They want quality clients, not a huge quantity swing.
That brings us to the camp model, which really seems to be one of the biggest success stories in the whole plan.
Oh, absolutely. In 2023, they decided to bring the day camp model in-house. Before, it was contracted out to a dance company.
And that pivot was huge from a revenue perspective.
It was genius. By internalizing it and aligning it with other departments like the museum, they immediately saw a 36% revenue increase per week.
36%? Wow. Where did that margin come from? Was it just higher enrollment?
It was mostly cost savings. By cutting out the external vendor, they basically captured the profit margin the vendor was taking. The plan says staff and material costs didn't go up, so that 36% is almost pure profit they can now use for other things.
That's an immediate high-impact funding source, and they're expanding it.
Massively. They're expanding to a 9-week summer camp, adding a March break camp, and they're even projecting a PA day camp starting in 2025. And a lot of the staff are grant-funded, which keeps the risk low.
And this all ties back to utilization.
100%. The camps run in the off-seasons, like August, when rentals are slow. It's designed to fill the building when it would otherwise be empty, driving that fill rate up towards their goal.
Which leads us perfectly to the final pillar, programming. This is a brand new business line for them, and it's all about being hyper-specific.
And this is where we get the clearest lesson on what works and what doesn't. They have this perfect side-by-side comparison.
The masterclass program.
The big failure. These are short 2- or 3-hour workshops on very general themes, open to a huge age range like from 12 to 71.
And why did it fail so badly?
Lack of focus. When you try to appeal to everyone, you often appeal to no one. It resulted in almost no registrations. It just proved that generalized programming was a dead end for them.
And you contrast that with the success of the Curtain Call program.
Exactly. Curtain Call was the complete opposite. It was highly targeted. A 10-week theater class for kids aged 8 to 16. And it was adapted from a program that had already worked well in their summer camp.
And the results?
19 dedicated participants, all local residents. The specialization worked. It created a successful, repeatable model.
So here's where it gets really strategic. They're using these programs to build what they call succession programming. It's like a customer pipeline.
It's brilliant long-term thinking. They literally map out this journey for a hypothetical kid named Isaac, showing how he can engage with the facility his entire life.
Walk us through Isaac's journey.
Okay, so Isaac starts as a toddler in their new Storybook Toddlers program. By age 6, he's in summer camp and the Curtain Call program. Once he's a teenager, he transitions into a volunteer leadership role at the camps.
So he goes from being a customer to part of the operation.
Exactly. And by 18, he's a prime candidate to be hired as a camp counselor. Then as an adult, he's either an employee with deep institutional knowledge or he's attending adult programs like salsa or improv. They're growing their future staff and their future audience at the same time.
And the curriculum itself is tied to educational standards, which has to be a big selling point.
A huge one.
Yeah.
The camp themes like Page to Stage or Circus Spectacular are directly linked to the Ontario curriculum for the arts. So for parents, it's not just a fun activity. It's valuable, justifiable educational spending.
So if we pull all 4 pillars together, concerts, rentals, camps, and programming, what's the final takeaway? What does it take to hit that 70% target?
It really boils down to maximizing every single hour. They have to leverage those historically dead months with the profitable in-house camps. They have to shift concerts away from general theater to proven theme nights like comedy and tributes.
And it all rests on building those lifelong customers through that succession programming model.
Right. It's about moving away from one-off transactions to building relationships. It's the difference between just running a facility and actually building a cultural identity.
You know, they have that quote from Ernesto Ciroli in the plan. Quote, "The future of every community lies in capturing the passion, imagination, and resources of its people."
Yeah.
This whole strategy feels like the blueprint for that.
It is. It's how you go from being the haunted clock tower to being the actual center of the community's arts scene. It takes this level of focus.
Which brings us to the provocative thought we want to leave you with. Given the undeniable success of the super targeted specialty programming like Curtain Call compared to the failure of the General Masterclass program,
How much higher could that 70% utilization target climb? What if every single new offering they launched was that specific, that targeted?
could they turn the facility into a collection of highly successful niche hubs instead of a general purpose venue?
It really raises a fundamental question for any community asset like this. In a world where everyone is overwhelmed, maybe broad appeal is actually the enemy of growth. Maybe for the arts, being specific is the smartest strategy of all.
A fantastic deep dive into the business of community arts. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.